We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Welcome to the Supernatural Hour podcast. I'm your host, Raven.
I'm Rogue.
This is Doc.
And I'm Chad.
Today, I'm excited about today because this podcast is actually the first of like a 3-part series. And the overall series is Salem Witch Trials. We're going to be talking about different aspects of the Salem Witch Trial for our next 3 podcasts because Halloween, spooky season, it's coming up, folks. It is the middle of September, and that pretty much means it's open season to decorate for Halloween.
Still waiting for those leaves to change. Come on, leaves.
Little intro here for this 3-part topic. We're going to start out with Giles Corey. And I am fascinated with the Salem Witch Trials. And to me, Salem Witch Trials is just the epitome of Halloween. You know, the witches and cauldron, toil and trouble, cauldron burn, boil and bubble.
Even the location, too. Just being up in New England and the fall and the leaves. And
it's old up there.
Yeah,
Sleepy Hollow.
Well,
exactly.
I mean, for the U.S. There's people listening to this in other countries going,
old.
Yeah, old, whatever.
Yeah, 1600s, huh? Doesn't seem that old.
So the little thing about Giles Corey is this is the same week is the anniversary of his death. When did he die, Rogue? When did you say his death was?
September 19th, 1692.
Okay, September 19th. Do you all know what September 19th also is?
National Ghost Hunting Day.
No, that's the 24th.
Okay.
No, September 19th is Talk Like a Pirate Day.
How did I not know this?
I don't know.
How do we not all know this?
Is that not common knowledge?
So Giles Corey was killed on Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Maybe he talked like a pirate.
Maybe that was a little insensitive. I'm sorry. I like Talk Like a Pirate Day, okay? Come on.
There you go.
So Giles Corey is, for those that don't know who he is, he was the only man that was killed, tried and executed as a witch in the Salem Witch Trials. And Chad and I have been there. We went there a few years ago.
Yeah. Salem was a very neat place to go. We missed it just as it was coming into the season.
Yeah, I think the season started about a week after we were there.
Mm.
And I tried to muscle my way into some places that were closed. I said, "We are clear from Utah. Can we just come in?" And they said no.
I was there in October, and it was pretty spectacular. It's an interesting place.
Yeah, but there were still quite a few places we could get into. I mean, I don't feel like it was the shops were open, the witch house was open.
And one of the things I gotta say... Go ahead.
Did either of you on your trips go to the Howard Street Cemetery?
Yes.
I'm trying to remember.
So I think the Howard Street Cemetery is the oldest cemetery there, correct? And
It's where they're buried, where the witches are buried from the trials. And then I noticed there's apartments right there. They didn't even give 6 feet, and there's apartment buildings right there.
Yeah, when I was there at the cemetery, they have a memorial there and a few other
there's a
markers.
memorial just laid out right boom 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 next to each other for all of those
Victims?
Yeah,
Yes.
and when I was there was fresh flowers that people were still laying out on the memorial site, basically.
I think it's Salem just in general is a pilgrimage for people that identify as witches, that practice witchcraft.
Oh yeah, that town has embraced the whole witch thing. You go one of two ways with this. You try to just ignore your past and pretend nothing happened, or you just dive in and say, we're going to take this witch theme and we're going to run with it.
Now, witchcraft, this could be a whole other topic on its own. So I want to get back into Giles Corey, but I think witchcraft is interesting because it has such a negative connotation, and you can do bad things with it, like anything. Anything can be used for good or bad. It's how you use it. But a lot of the people that I've talked to in this field that are witches and practice
Wiccan.
witchcraft, most people, it's just nature stuff. It's just, using nature, using herbs, using natural remedies, natural things.
Many of the kinds of practices and things that were done with the Celts pre-Christianity, that kind of stuff.
Right, that's kind of Wicca, neo-paganism, that kind of stuff.
Right, I've run into probably a dozen people that say I'm a witch, and not one of them is out sacrificing children in the backyard with eye of newt and hair of toad. I haven't run into any of them.
Right.
It's usually put a pot of daisy in your kid's room and the demons won't come in.
I think the definition of what constitutes a witch has changed pretty significantly since 1692.
Right. So let's talk about Corey a little bit. So before the whole witch thing, let's delve into his earlier years, as far as we know. He was actually considered to be... So at the time of the witch trials, he was in his 80s. So he wasn't some strapping, 30-year-old look. And to get to the age of 80 in the 1600s, I mean, that in and of itself could probably be considered witchcraft.
What are you doing to live so long, you witch?
Right? Do you have a sorcerer's stone? Is your name Nicholas Flamel? I'm going to be that person that puts a Harry Potter reference in everything. That's my new shtick.
And I'll still be the person shaking her head going, I don't understand.
Okay, you and I have to have a Harry Potter marathon, lady. We got to get you up to snuff here.
And we can put other movie references into.
Okay, folks, this is a new thing. I just came up on the fly. If I do a podcast without a Harry Potter reference, you let me know and I'll give you a candy bar. Okay, so he's 80, so he's already lived most of his life, right? But because he was so old and the town is so small and they didn't do a whole lot of traveling back in those days, if you traveled, it was, within 10 miles.
A few miles, yeah.
Right. So a lot of people considered him to be a violent man already. He was, in 1676, he had a farmhand by the name of Jacob Goodale. And Giles Corey, beat him. He was charged with beating this farmhand to death. Killed him. And he stood trial, and there's a fellow by the name of John Proctor testified that he heard Giles Corey admit he had beaten Goodale. But I don't know why, but they just fined him. They're like, all right, pay us $100, you're good to go. They didn't put him away. I don't know why. It didn't go into that. It's the 1600s. We don't have a ton of records and forensic evidence and stuff, but he was only fined. And so when it came time, for the witch trials and all the things that came down, for him to be, charged with that, he already had a ding against him. The people in the town already
didn't love the man.
Didn't love him and were suspicious of him to begin with things that were completely unrelated with witchcraft.
When I was looking into him, I found that at the time of the witch trials, he was on his third wife. But when they were looking back at him, they felt like he had murdered his first wife, Mary, because they first deemed it as an accident that she fell down the stairs. But when they looked at it, excuse me. But when they looked at it, they showed where the stairs were, that the two stairs didn't connect, so it really didn't make sense that she died falling down the stairs. So they actually accused him of killing his first wife as well.
Right, and then, he killed his farmhand, it's not completely, and he admitted to it, not completely out of the realm of possibility.
Right. And it sounds like the witch trials kind of evolved, interestingly, involving his third spouse. She was accused of being a witch as well. It's kind of where that starts out, right? And it sounds like he was kind of on board with it when it first happened. He's like, oh yeah, she might be a witch.
The tensions were so high back then. I think if you sneezed funny, they probably accused you of being a witch.
Princess Bride. A witch! A witch!
From what it sounds like they made these accusations and they're like, hey, we think your wife's a witch. He's like, yeah, probably. And then all of a sudden it's like, and you're a witch too. And he's like, oh no, that's not true.
Right? Because he called and he's like, well, she could be a witch. My cat died and my ox is kind of sick, so I don't know. And so then they take her away And then a little while later, he's like, well, maybe she wasn't a witch. And they're like, well, maybe you are a witch.
Trying to cover
what a
for her now.
crazy time.
Right. Well, and then, you talked about the illness of the ox and the pet cat. He claims that there was a sudden illness, and then he told everybody, my ox and my pet cat just, boom, out of the blue got sick. But I noticed that my wife stays up late at night, and she kneels by the fireplace like she's praying. And they said, do you hear her reciting any prayers? And he's like, no, she just kneels there. So obviously she's a witch.
If you're not hearing those prayer words, a witch.
Definitely. Because heaven forbid you say the words in your head.
Don't meditate. Don't be thinking about stuff. You got to be saying stuff.
I figure.
Don't go and sit close to the fire when it might be cold.
Right. I figure, it's a little chilly. She's probably there looking at the fireplace going, oh, I've got to clean this out. Just one more thing for me to do.
And she's thinking, as long as I'm sitting here, he's not going to bug me because I'm praying.
It's just funny
because he was a jerk.
That's right. As long as I'm praying, he'll leave me alone.
You get people a little afraid, and you just can whip them up into a frenzy, and then you start thinking crazy, crazy stuff. And then Corey Giles died. The end. Good night.
Podcast over.
I'm just
All
kidding.
right.
We've got more to talk about.
That was cool.
One of the things they said was when they started having the trials, there's the girls, and we'll get more into this in the next podcast, the actual Salem Witch Trials. We're building up to the big event. But the girls that started this accusation, there's the accusations and the talking. When they finally started having the trials, Giles and his wife at the time, Martha, were some of the first people to attend these, pre-trial examinations. It's almost like they wanted to be in the thick of things. Were they pot stirrers? Were they, why were they the first ones? Ooh!
Maybe they were just curious.
Exactly.
Come on.
Are they just curious?
You're putting people on trial for being witches. It's pretty interesting stuff, right?
Their subscription to HBO had expired.
That's right.
They didn't have Netflix and chill.
I already binge watched all the shows. We're just going to come to the trial.
Pre-TikTok, precursor to TikTok with the trials, right? We might have to cut this out while we research a little bit. Hang on. So, so everything goes down. He goes to trial. And even the trials, it would have been interesting to be a fly on the wall and watch these trials, because I'm sure the people at the time were not amused, because they were killing people. They were burning people at the stake.
They didn't burn anybody at the stake.
That's true. As I was saying that, I realized
they were hanging people, though.
They were hanging people.
They're killing people. They're killing.
The burning at the stake was a different.
That's European.
Different thing.
Yeah, it's so European.
Jonah Ark
Burning
kind
at
of
the
stuff.
stake.
If you go to Edinburgh and you're on the Royal Mile, there's a little plaque on a wall that shows. Oh no, it shows where they drowned, which is not burned them at the stake. Never mind. It's still interesting.
Hey,
though.
however, there's multiple ways.
Yeah. So no, they weren't burned. They were. They were. So that's what happens when I improvise. I tell the wrong stories. But if you go to the Royal Mile in Edinburgh, up towards the top, there's a little plaque, and it talks about how they dunked the witches there. Nothing to do with. There's no burning. We are not talking about any burning witches today.
I heard a theory on that in an important documentary on Monty Python,
Mm-hmm.
where they were talking about why witches floated and didn't, and ducks. Do you remember that?
I do.
Oh,
remember
this
that
is
time?
painful. Oh, it's Monty Python, so y'all know it's painful. So let's hear it.
I don't remember. It's just something
Oh.
he's giving the explanation of why witches don't float or do float, because they're way the same as a duck.
That's right. So logically, if a witch weighs
Floats.
more than a duck,
If the
or no,
person
the witch
weighs-
weighs less than a duck, then they're gonna get
if they float, then
killed.
so it works out. If they drowned and don't float, they're dead and they weren't a witch. But if they do float, they're a witch. So then you take them out and burn them at the stake.
But only if you're in,
That's
Europe.
a great test.
That's right.
But only if you're in Europe.
You want to drown or you want to burn?
Okay.
Two options.
Back to
Back
Sanity.
to reality.
well, I don't know that
I was
I don't
gonna
know
say
that this is
sanity
sanity
on that
here. But I'm sure that at the time it was very stressful because people were dying, right? But looking back at this now, it's almost comical, and I just don't understand. So they've got Giles Corey on the stand, and they're examining him, right? And they've got these judges, and they're questioning him, and they keep telling him that he's lying. You're lying. And they were so afraid that he was going to practice witchcraft sitting on the stand that during his trial, they had to tie his hands behind his back so that he couldn't wave his fingers and do hocus pocus.
Because that's what it's all about. Waving fingers.
Yeah, and one of them, there was a court record written by a fellow named Reverend Samuel Paris. And he says, all the afflicted were seized now with fits and troubled with pinches. Then the court ordered his hands to be tied. And the magistrate said, what, is it not enough to act witchcraft at other times, but must you do it now in the face of authority? And Corey said, I am a poor creature and cannot help it. Upon the motion of his head, they had their heads and necks afflicted. Magistrate, why do you tell such wicked lies against witnesses that heard you speak after this manner this very morning? And Corey said, I never saw anything but a black hog. That's how that went down. So they decided he was a witch and tied his hands so that he wouldn't.
So people wouldn't be afflicted with pinches.
Yes.
And the shakes, apparently. There's
Yes.
seizure-like activity.
Yes.
And they were like, why are you doing this? And he's like, I don't know. I'm not doing anything. I
So they
can't control
actually-
this stuff.
At one point, they untied his hands because they started feeling bad. I mean, he's an 80-year-old man. I mean, he's,
Oh, and I'm sure that activity, boom.
right? But as soon as they untied his hands, one of the girls in the audience started having fits.
He's got to be guilty.
It's got to be a witch.
The guy probably had like dementia too. He's like 80 years old. He's like, I don't know, I'm not trying. And they're like, nope, you're a witch. Die, man, die.
Now, Corey initially was kind of into this whole thing. He really got into it. He was one of the first people there.
They showed up at the pre-trials, right?
And, I mean, to the point that he even participated in accusing his own wife.
Right.
She's a witch. She's a witch.
But after a while, he kind of lost his steam. And I don't know if it's just he realized the severity of it. I don't know if... I don't know.
You're like, nah, it was cute when it started, but like for real, people are dying now, so...
Yeah,
Not
at
loving
what
this.
point do you go, oh, wait a minute.
Once you become accused as a witch.
That's
Right.
a pretty good point.
That's a good point to stop. And it sounds like after the accusation, he refused to enter a plea. Is that right?
Yeah, he pretty much, just got really stubborn. And so, they started torturing him. And...
Because the best pleas come out under torture.
Yeah, when you're under duress.
Yep. So it says he had taken advantage of a widely used legal tactic, and this legal tactic was called standing mute when he was asked questions.
Pleading the fifth, basically?
Pleading the fifth, So English law at that time ordered any prisoner who stood mute to be tortured in attempt to unmute.
I didn't see that in the Fifth Amendment.
I know, which I'm very glad. I'm glad they refined that a little bit.
That part was updated slightly.
Thank you. So it was a tactic known as Bien fort et deux, which is probably French. And if you speak French, I know that sounded about as great as my singing. So I apologize. But it translates into strong and harsh punishment. So the exact torture procedure consisted of, and if you remember, we did a torture device episode last year about this time, give or take. And people can just really be nasty to each other. But what they would do in Salem, they would strip the prisoner naked, they'd lay him on the ground, place a board on him, and then they would put heavy stones on it. And the weight was slowly increased over the course of several days until the prisoner said, fine, here's the information.
I'm either guilty or not guilty, right?
Yep. And Corey kind of knew this was going to happen. He actually, before this happened, he took measures to protect his lands and to, block local authorities from taking his possessions, which I find is interesting. It's almost like he knew this was going to go
die.
down.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's no way out after the accusation point.
Well, and some of the things on this, some of the accusations were about that. There were family feuds that had been taken, that had been happening and things, and it's like, I can take revenge on this other person by accusing them of being a witch because, they did a bad deal on the pig with me. I felt like I got cheated on the pig, and so, hey, they're a witch.
And I don't have to prove that I got cheated. I just have to
Make an accusation.
make an accusation that someone's going to believe.
And everyone's going to run with it because no matter what you do, once you're accused, it was in such a frenzy that,
A little Me Too-ish.
yes. And I think he got to the point where, when he said he really kind of stepped back away from it, I think he realized, wow, this is serious. I'm probably going to go down. And the way he safeguarded his property is he actually gave his property to his sons and sons-in-law so that the sheriff couldn't seize it, because the sheriff had been seizing property
Of the witch accused.
of the accused.
That is pretty smart, and I think they still live there and own the property to this day, from what I could tell from my current research.
The Giles family.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, so this isn't funny. Well, the next thing I'm going to say is not funny, but the picture I have in my mind, I feel so bad for this man because they're pressing him. Okay, he gets to the point where they're like, "No, you're a witch. We're going to try to get this information out of you. We're going to make you confess. Lay down. We're putting a board on you."
And he's 80 years old.
Right? 80, folks. In the 1600s.
And the only thing all he's saying to them is more weight, because he's not going to say he's a witch. So
right, he knows
he's going to die.
He was not going to confess. So there they are, this 80-year-old man. They're pressing to death with stones, and he keeps saying more stones. So they're adding more on. So while he's there, literally being squished, and I don't mean that with any disrespect, I really don't, but that's what is happening.
He's being crushed to death.
He's being crushed to death. And then somebody from the church comes over and is like, "Oh, on top of it all, you're excommunicated now."
Yeah. Thanks for holding true. Yeah, we're done with you.
I just thought, wow. He had a really bad day.
Yeah, and then his tongue was hanging out, and so they thought, well, he can't answer you because he's dehydrated and his tongue is hanging out. So they would pay, I think it was the sheriff or somebody would have somebody like once an hour go over and stick his tongue back in his mouth, so he would have the opportunity to talk. And they said that his eyes were bulging out also.
From all the pressure.
Yeah, so in the church documents, when they excommunicated him, the document said that he was either guilty of witchcraft or of suicide due to his choice to endure lethal torture rather than enter a plea.
And either one of them's excommunicatable.
No heaven for you, is what they're basically telling him.
Yep.
You ended up in a predicament beyond your control, and you have two bad options. No matter which one you choose, we're done.
Now,
well, that's karma for you, right, though? He's got a little bit of karma coming back to him for what we know he did do to his farmhand.
He's got a history, that's for sure.
Right. So the one interesting thing about his execution was, he was tortured for days. This didn't just happen over a course of a couple hours. It was days, multiple days. So he was a tough 80-year-old.
Yeah, stubborn, super stubborn.
At the end, the sheriff got on I think it was like after day 3, the sheriff got on top of 750 pounds and started jumping up and down on the rocks, telling him, "Just say you're a witch. Just say you're a witch." And that was putting him like in his final last breaths.
Right.
That kind of took him to the end.
And even though he was a violent man and killed somebody, you do have to kind of give him some kudos.
Allegedly killed somebody.
No, he confessed that he did.
To someone, but not in court.
Yeah.
Right?
No, this was...
Someone said he killed someone.
This was the farmhand. This wasn't witch stuff.
No, that's what I'm saying. That was still somewhat alleged.
So, so regardless how violent he was or was not, you do have to give him some kudos that he was sticking to his guns. I am not a witch, and I'm not going to say it, even if you squish me with 750 pounds of rocks.
And the sheriff. Yeah, that's
So-
pretty darn impressive, actually.
But a positive thing, so he got his karma, Let's say he killed the farmhand. It actually happened. He did get his karma. But the interesting thing is, due to the gruesomeness of his execution and how very public it was, and how vehemently he was denying it, it said that a lot of the residents of Salem started to question the whole thing.
Right.
Should we be doing this? Is this really a thing? What are we doing? They took pause. They stepped back and were like, whoa.
Maybe we went too far.
Let's rethink some things.
And didn't that basically end the witch trials?
I think so. I think that was definitely where it started to take that downturn and calm down.
But we do have to mention, with his final words, his words to the sheriff were, he cursed the sheriff. And
this is amazing.
So, do you want to talk about that? So he cursed. I didn't write down the exact words that he used. But then the sheriff, within 6 months, died of a heart attack. And then for 300 consecutive years, all sheriffs working in Salem died of heart attacks.
Yes.
Or some type of blood disease.
Yeah, so the exact
until
words...
they moved the sheriff department.
Mm-hmm. I actually wrote it down.
In the 90s.
He said, "Damn you, I curse you and Salem." And Corey said that to the sheriff before he died. And then it says 4 years after he died, Sheriff Corwin, who was the jumping up and down sheriff, the sheriff at the time, died of a heart attack at 30 years old. And every sheriff from 1692 until 1991 had, died of mysterious incidences. There's one in the 1970s. There was a fellow named Sheriff Robert Cahill. He was forced to retire early due to a stroke, heart attack, and rare blood condition. And he looked into the history of the sheriff's office. And there's a book. It's described in the book Cursed in New England. So it says, about 300 years later, in 1978, Robert Cahill, while in office, suffered a rare blood disease, a heart attack, and a stroke. Doctors could not find the cause of his afflictions. He was forced to retire as sheriff of Essex County and as master and keeper of the jail. Today he lives in Florida. Mr. Cahill notes that the sheriff before him also contracted a serious blood ailment while in office. It forced him to retire. He in turn had inherited the post from his father after the elder man died of a heart attack while serving as sheriff. The sheriff before him had suffered heart problems, so have all the others as far back as I could trace. And the two men who have followed me have had an awful lot of trouble.
So it makes you wonder. If the curse is real.
Yeah.
Or is it donuts?
Could be that high-fat content. Good point. Good point.
So in 1991, they actually moved the sheriff's office from Salem to a new prison in Middleton, and they think that's what broke the curse, because they said since then no sheriffs have been diagnosed with any heart conditions or blood ailments.
Moved it out of Salem, huh?
Yep. Now, local residents say that Corey's ghost haunts the area around the Howard Street Cemetery, and that his ghost is often seen before and after terrible events happen in the town. So if you see Giles Corey, get out of Dodge, because something bad's going to go down.
Salem's not a very big town either.
It's not.
Pretty small. It's very walkable.
Mm-hmm.
That's why when you asked about the cemetery, I was thinking, I went to the main cemetery. I don't know if there's another one.
And I don't know, are they actually, I don't think that they're actually buried there. Are they buried there, or did they just have memorials there? I thought they just had memorials of all the
My understanding is
there.
Giles Corey is buried in an unmarked grave, and that they have the memorial set up there to.
And that would have been the
remember
case
them.
with probably all of the witches, because
You
they
weren't
wouldn't-
worthy of a gravesite.
Right, you didn't get the Christian burial. You didn't get the.
They just dug
the
a hole out in
sacred
the
ground.
unhallowed ground.
Just throw you in it.
Interesting.
So let me give you an example of a terrible event. It was right before the Great Salem Fire in 1914. Have you guys heard about that one? And witnesses said that before this fire, they saw a ghostly figure of an old man floating through the cemetery. And the fire actually started near the area of Gallows Hill.
There's like a playground there now. Mm-hmm. Kind of a weird place to put a playground.
But Gallows Hill isn't where the hangings were done.
No, there you go.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in another podcast.
Ooh, probably in follow-up 2 or 3.
But that's the story, is that the fire started near the area of Gallows Hill.
And where the ghostly apparition was.
Well, the apparition was in the cemetery. But there is some good news. There's some good news. In 1711, the Massachusetts state legislature passed a bill clearing some of the names of the accused witches, which included Giles and Martha Corey, and they paid restitution for their imprisonment and death.
That was less than 20 years later? Is that right? I mean, it was 1692 when they died.
1692 and then 1711, so 19 years.
Wow. You came to acknowledge the error of your ways fairly quickly if it took you less than 2 decades to exonerate or, pardon.
And then I'm looking through my notes, and I don't see where I wrote it, but I do believe that the church recommunicated them.
Unexcommunicated.
Unexcommunicated. What's the right word?
Would it just be communicated?
Get restored their membership.
Reinstated, yeah.
That's a good one.
He was reinstated into the church.
Yeah. Words. If you want eloquence, I am not it.
Nope. Don't sign me up.
All right. So there's a thing that says Giles Corey Memorial Marker is located in the Salem Witch Trials Memorial in Salem, Massachusetts. He and his wife also have 2 memorial markers at their former farm near Crystal Lake in Peabody, Massachusetts. You notice how I said Peabody?
Instead of Peabody?
If you go to Massachusetts, they say Peabody. So now I say that and act like I'm really cool because I know stuff.
I would have said Peabody. I would have said it wrong.
It's Peabody. There you go.
Like lobster?
Your trivia of the day. Pot the cough. Go to the Peabody Cemetery.
That's right.
If you're from Massachusetts, I'm very sorry. I mean no disrespect. I actually have a really good friend that's from the Boston area, and it's really cool to listen to his accent.
Dude, they own the accent, though. Like, they're proud of it. It's great.
That's awesome. Okay, so our next 2 podcasts are going to be Salem Witch Trial-y. Look forward to that because I am super excited. Giles Corey, I find him very interesting. I find the whole thing very interesting, but just get into the spookiness of Halloween and witches and all things haunted. Doc, how's your mug?
My mug's doing awesome. I put wassail in it yesterday. It's not really that cool, but it is fall, so we opted to do some wassail. But yeah, the mug's awesome. There's a lot of great stuff on advancedparanormal.com. You can find Supernatural Hour swag there, including tapestry, shirts, bumper stickers, you name it, and mugs. And the mug has held up fabulously, so
It's pretty.
I like it. It's got our logo on it. So yeah, if you are interested, hop on over to advancedparanormal.com and take a look at what we got.
And Rogue?
Jump on advancedparanormal.com for our swag. We've got our cleansing kits and our sage sprays, lip balms, sage rollers. We're going to have everything out at our events. Remember, those are made local. Thank you for your support.
Yeah, you can order those on our website, advancedparanormal.com, or if you pop up to Logan on the 9th, we're going to have a booth there. We're going to have our booth at
Indian Hills Horror Haunted House, but it's not in Indian Hills anymore. That's where it originated, but the horror has moved to West Provo.
If you haven't, hop onto YouTube. We've got some, our podcasts are there.
AdvancedParanormal.com. Yeah, YouTube/AdvancedParanormal.
Yep, hop over to YouTube. We've had some people that really prefer to watch it on YouTube because they like the visuals. We've got pictures going. Also, hop on TikTok. We've got some fun stuff up on TikTok.
Followers are going up, I saw.
We're almost at 1,400.
Heck yeah.
1,400 followers, so that's pretty exciting.
I was checking out our listen notes score for podcasts a little while back, and we are ranking in the top 2% globally. So,
And you know what? That's all because of you guys. And I'm just going to give a shout out to, we have listeners internationally.
oh yeah,
And I'm going to forget somebody. So I do know that we have a gal that listens to us on the African continent. I know we have Australian listeners. I know a Swedish listener. We have listeners in England, Canada. There's one more. I'm forgetting it. Austria. Did I say Australia already?
You said
too?
Australia already.
So, but I do believe Austria. So if you're listening to us out of the country, thank you. If you're listening to us in the country, also thank you. We appreciate each and every one of you.
It's been fun to watch
All 8 of you.
things grow. Yeah,
We have
I think
more
it's
than
taken
8.
more than 8 to get in the top 2% globally, but
Yeah, just know that we really appreciate you dedicating
Your time.
your time to
listen
listen to us,
thank you.
even though I get kind of crazy sometimes. Quick shout out to Barbary Coast, Oteos, Utah Freeze Ride for Pets, Castle's Nature Studio, and Bora Off-Road Backcountry Off-Road Adventure Rally. I've got
I think there
off-road
was
in
an
there.
extra off-road in there.
Just, okay, good night. I think I'm done.
And
I'm
don't
gonna go to
forget
bed
our
early.
favorite groomer. Got our Rescue Pets bathhouse.
Stay spooky, my haunty friends.
Love you, Nicholas.
Have a good one.
Hey, good night.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright 2021 by Advanced Paranormal Services.